Okay. This is an interview for the Voces Oral History Project. My name is Vinicio Cinta, and I am interviewing Mr. J. Rodriguez. We're in Palm Desert, California. Today is April 2, 2017. Mr. Rodriguez, thanks again for granting us this interview.
You're very welcome.
It's completely voluntary, so if you want to take a break at any moment, just let me know and I'll stop the camera.
No, but when I go like this, I need to just have a drink of water to keep my throat moist.
Sure. Go at any point. If you want to take a break, let me know and I can stop the camera.
I don't need a break. I just need to keep my throat because it dries up and it's hard to talk.
Yes. And the other thing is, if at some point there's any question that you want to answer or you'd like to skip it, just let me know and we'll move on.
I shouldn't have a problem.
All right. So I'd like to begin asking about your background.
Okay.
So can you tell me about your childhood? Where were you born and how was it growing up in?
I was born in Laverne, California, which is a very small town. The largest city next to it is Pomona. It's about 30 miles out of Los Angeles, east of Los Angeles. There were only, when I was born, probably about 3,000 people. So it was a very, very small town. There were two parts of town. It was lemons and oranges were the biggest business there. They had two packing houses for oranges and one for lemons. So it was a big employment source, and there were groves all over. Laverne was called the heart of the Orange Empire, and everybody there was related to the business of citrus. Matter of fact, the packing houses built below the railroad tracks, built a lot of houses so they could house their employees. That in Laverne, that was called Mexican Town, and north of the tracks was just called Laverne. So that there was really just two cities, one Mexican and one Anglo. And I lived there. I lived there till I was 26 years old. I went to elementary school there. I went to high school there, Bonita High School. And then I went on to Mount San Antonio College in Walnut, and then moved on from there. But Laverne was a great town. I mean, they didn't have any of the big city problems. We didn't have any gangs. We didn't have any killings or anything else. It was just a tiny little town that was very, 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 very homogeneous and just. The only problem they had is because the Depression started a year after I was born. I think it was in October of 1929. It had started before then, but not seriously. The market would go up and down like a yo-yo, and then the Depression started in October of 1989, and the banks crashed, and it was a horrible time. Everybody was poor. There just wasn't any money around because there were no jobs. I understand the unemployment was 20%, but I dare say it was higher than that. I don't know how my father ever supported his family. There were 6 of us in the family, 3 girls and 3 boys. I was the oldest boy. My sister Deanie was the oldest girl. She's 94 and she lives in Chino. And it was my mother and father, so we had 8 people in the family. And here we are. My father was a journeyman plasterer, and he could do masonry work. He used to do block walls and cements and patios and all that. But where do you find a job for all of that? He found a job and kept his family alive. We never lacked for housing. My father used to build his own houses. We never lacked for clothes. We'd go down every September and get a new pair of corduroys. That was what we used to buy. A couple of shirts, and I was ready for school. I wore one pair to school and one pair was in the wash. And my father really wasn't educated, neither was my mother. I don't think either of them went past the third grade. My father was born in Eagle Pass, Texas. My mother was born in Douglas, Arizona. But they both came to California because his brother lived here and my mother's sister lived here, and they were married to each other. So my mother came out to take care of my aunt and met my father, and they got married. So our two brothers married two sisters. But my father always provided for us. He told us all, there were 6 of us in the family, you can go to as much school as you want. I will pay for it. I will put you through college, and he did. And we've done fairly well, for a family who grew up very, very poor with not a lot of financial support. My oldest sister worked as an administrator at a community college. She was at Mount San Antonio College for, oh boy, over 40 years. My sister Betty married a school teacher, and then when her kids got through high school, she went back and got her teaching degree, and she was a teacher. My third sister Alice, she did the same thing. She put her kids through high school, and then she went back and got her teaching credential, and she became a teacher. Then I went through Mount San Antonio College and University of California, Riverside, and got a job in the media. I'll tell you about that in a second. Then my brother Robert, he went to work in the police department in Pomona, and he worked there for 27 years and retired. And my last brother, Richard, who was born 9 years after I was born, he was a junior high school principal. So here you've got 6 kids who had no money, who my father was, I have no idea how he did it. I still don't to this day. Put us all through college, all of us, and we ended up with very good employment. If you'd like me to stop and you can ask another question, otherwise I'll just continue on and go to the next phase.
Well, I have one question actually.
Okay.
You said it was like 2 cities.
Right.
So what were there divisions, for example, in the who attended which school or that kind of thing?
There were 2 schools. One was a Mexican school. One was the Anglo school. We lived north of the tracks next to the packing house. About every year, the principal of the elementary school, which was Lincoln School, would tell my mother, next year, your kids have to go to Palomares, the Mexican school, because after all, we were Mexicans. There were no Mexicans in Lincoln School, by the way. My mother said, no, they're not. We live north of the railroad tracks. My children are not going to cross those railroad tracks to go to school. So I'm not going to send them to school down there. She would march up to the principal's office with her minister and a lady who was very influential in the schools, who loved our family. My sister Alice, she especially loved, and they both came to bat for us, and they said, first of all, we quote, don't look Mexican. Second of all, we speak perfect English. Why are you sending them to Palomares? I mean, for all practical purposes, they're Anglos. They grew up among Anglos. They speak perfect English. I mean, the people down there, their primary language is Spanish, and that whole part of the city. That's their language. That's their life. So they let us stay there. Then another family came to Lincoln, but they were Spanish. They were okay, because that's European, isn't it? It's not Mexican. Then a third family who did a lot of work in the Anglo homes, whose name was Soto, S-O-T-O, he sent his kids to Lincoln. So now we've got, 3 families at Lincoln School. But they didn't, this back now, of course, I'm talking about 1928 to 1930 something. They didn't integrate the schools until 1954. Can you believe that? They didn't integrate the schools until 1954. And then it was kind of ironic because they didn't close Paul and Mars School. They just made that. They had two levels of schools. They made that part of the elementary school. So the kids would go there to do, let's say, kindergarten through about third or fourth or fifth grade. Then they would come up to Lincoln for the rest of their schooling and go on to Bonita High School, which shared the high school with San Dimas and Laverne Heights. Well, the Anglos aren't going to let their kids go down to a Mexican town to go to a school. Boy, they scream bloody murder. So school board's not stupid. They get elected to their position. So they undid that, and they let everybody go to school in Lincoln School. It became not the only school in town because Paul and Mars was still there, but everybody went to Lincoln School, and then on to Bonita High School, which was fully integrated.
So was the fact that there were so few Mexican American Latino families in Lincoln School, was there any bullying or did that affect the relationship between students?
Everybody got along fine with each other. I don't remember ever. I had one problem on my first day in school. I was in kindergarten. I'm 5 years old, and I was on a teeter-totter, and I was on a teeter-totter playing with another kindergartner, and his brother, who was 2 years older and 2 grades higher than I was, he came over and he said, "If I see you out here on the playground, I'm going to beat the crap out of you." I tell you, he scared me. I mean, I'm only 5 years old. I was a big kid, but hell, I'm 5 years old. He's 8 years old. I mean, he scared the crap out of me. So I made it a point never ever to be alone. I was always with my friends to make sure he didn't beat me up. Well, lucky for me, his family transferred out of town, and he moved on. But outside of that one incident, I was never threatened. I was never a problem, and I don't know if they ever had any problems in the school with interracial problems. I don't remember any. There could have been some. I don't say that there weren't any. I just say I'm not aware of any. They were not a major problem.
Were there African American or Asian American families?
There wasn't a single African American in town or in school. Zero. I went to Bonita High School. There wasn't one single African American at Bonita High School. Not one. Pomona had some, not many. The Africans were all in LA. They came later, and I'll tell you about that if you want. But no, there were no Africans in Laverne or San Dimas or Pomona. They were not here yet.
Okay, so I kind of stopped you because you were moving on you were telling me about the schools and your family that
Okay.
growing up during the Depression.
Okay. My sisters graduated from Bonita, and they went on to college. At that time, Mount San Antonio College was not there. They went over to Chaffey College in Ontario, and they all. One of them didn't graduate. She got a job with the American Friends Service Committee. So it's a church group, and went to Mexico to work among in the small villages, to work to help the people in the village to exist and live a better life. So she was down there for a couple of years, and then she came back to California, and she and I finished school together. We both went to Mount San Antonio College. So anyway, I went to Benita High School, and I did very well. Uh, for all practical purposes, I was an Anglo. I mean, my friends were Anglo. I spoke nothing but English. My parents would speak Spanish to us. We'd answer them in English, so they learned English, and we learned Spanish. I couldn't read it, I couldn't write it. So I went to the high school, and when I was a freshman, I was president of the Junior Red Cross. Don't forget now, the war started the year I started Benita. The war started in 1941. I started Benita High School in September of 1942. So I was 14 years old, so I'm not going to get drafted. I'm still, a boy, a young boy. And I went there for 4 years, and I did very well. I was president of the Boys Association. I was captain of the football team. I played on the football team, the basketball team, the baseball team, the track team. It was only a school of 400, so you could go from one sport to the next. You can't do that now, because nowadays, if you play baseball, you start school in September. They start practicing in September. You can't really play more than one sport. Back in my days, because the school was so small, you could play all the sports, and that's what happened. The football team became the basketball team with the addition of maybe 2 or 3 players who didn't play football, and they became the baseball team with the addition of players who didn't play basketball or football. So you just floated around, and I played all of them, and I was very good. I was on the all-league team. I was captain of the football team. I was in the junior play in high school, and I went to Mount San Antonio College. At Mount San Antonio College, I did very well there too. I was selected to be on the all-star team for the league, and I was even selected to be on the all-state team for the state of California. I was a tackle, and I was put on the all-state team as the best tackle in all of California. So I was very lucky that I was good in one sport, and succeeded very well. So I'm at Mount San Antonio College, and when I first got there, I thought I was going to be a forest ranger and then write books on the side. That didn't work out, because I discovered when I got there, I've got to take botany and what was the other chemistry. Those are not my favorite topics. What the hell am I doing in taking botany and chemistry? So I switched over to journalism. When I was in high school, by the way, I was the assistant editor of the school paper. So I'd written for the Benita Bearcats, which is our high school paper. So at Mount Sac, Benita and Mount Sac, I took journalism courses. The journalism teacher came over to one day, and he announced that the local paper, which is the Progress Bulletin, had reached him and said they were looking for somebody to work in the circulation department, and would somebody in the class like to volunteer to work there in the journalism department, which was after school. You had to package the papers up and then ride around in a motor scooter and deliver the papers to all the machines that you buy papers, and the liquor stores and the markets where people buy their newspapers. So, I didn't raise my hand either, and lucky for me, he came back to my seat, and he said, "I think you ought to go there and see what that job is all about." And I said, "Hillard, I'm going to go out for baseball, in the spring. How can I take a job? I'll be playing baseball." But I thought about it, and I thought, I'm not good enough to play professional baseball, but you got a job after school, so you better take that job. So I did. I took that job, and later on, they would find other jobs for me. I used to go out on Saturdays and collect delinquent subscribers who didn't pay their bill, and I used to move some cabinets for the advertising department. So when school was over, they offered me a job in the advertising department. that's how I got into the newspapers. I wasn't so much a journalist. I was in advertising. But a small paper like that, you sell the ads, you write the ads, you design the ads, you do everything to do the ads. And I love that work. I mean, I thought I was going to be there for the rest of my life. And then the war broke out in 1950, and Truman federalized two divisions, one in Georgia and one in California. And we got sent to Camp Cook, which is Vandenberg Air Force Base now, Camp Cook, and we got more training. And then they sent the second division over to Korea to fight because if you know the Korean War, they ran the Koreans clear up to the Chinese border, and because they were so close to the border, the Chinese came into the war, and they ran the Americans all the way to the bottom part of Korea. And then MacArthur was of course heading the war. He brought over additional help, and so the second division was the occupation army in Japan, and they sent them over to Korea. So we took their place in Japan, and we were the occupation army in Japan, and we continued to train in Japan. But that was great, because the Japanese, it's not like the wars today. They kill people, they cause all kinds of problems. The Japanese were perfect to us. There was only one day we couldn't leave the base. That was on May Day, which I guess is a big communist holiday. Other than that one day, we could go any place we wanted to, and they were very polite. And I thought Japan was the most beautiful country I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, gorgeous. They grow flowers and foliage and everything all over every place. In the railroad tracks, they'll plant a garden out there. I mean, it's just a beautiful country. So we trained in Japan. For about 6 months one time, we were on the slopes of Mount Fuji. We went up above the forest line in Mount Fuji, and because we could run our tanks up there, and we were there for 6 months. And our regiment was up there. The whole division wasn't up there, but we were up there because we had tanks, and we were there for 6 months. And then we went up to the top part of Honshu, which is the largest island, and near Aomori, and we continued to train, and we started to train to go to Korea. And we went to Korea and landed in Incheon, and were sent to the front, and we were there for 6 months, and then my enlistment period was over, so I got sent home.
Did you see any fighting? Did you
Yes.
take part?
Again, those wars were different from today's wars. Today's wars, you really can't tell who the enemy is. It's not unlike back in revolutionary times when two armies would find a field, face each other, and they would meet and fight a battle in the middle of the field. It wasn't quite like that, but it's not like today. Today, you don't know who the enemy is. It could be that little old lady who's got a live bomb strapped to her body. It could be a 9-year-old boy whose mother put a bomb in him. He's going to send him out to visit with these soldiers in his car and blow himself up and blow the car up. And people are getting killed. You've seen what's happened. We won the Iraq War in what, about a month? We've been there for 15 years? We're still in Afghanistan. We won that war probably in a month, and we're still there. But that's because wars are different. People don't, quote, surrender and accept whatever happens. The Japanese did. They surrendered, and they didn't create any problems for anybody. They were great to be occupied because they were killing anybody. I don't know of anybody that got killed. We were there, or anybody that caused problems for the American Army who were there. None that I remember.
So, all in all, how much time did you spend overseas with the military?
How much time? What now?
How much time did you spend overseas?
About 16 months.
So how did you feel about so at this point you were already working full time at the in advertising?
Yes.
So how was it to have your career interrupted at that point?
Well, I'd been there at that point for 13 years. So I was gone for 2 years in the Army. I came back and got my job back, so I was there a total of, I think, of 15 years at the Progress Bulletin. When by the way, when I graduated from Mount San Antonio College, my coach, my high school coach, took me into USC to see if I could get a scholarship, and the coach was Jeff Cravath, and so we talked, and I, as I told you before, I was made these all-star teams, so I was a pretty good football player. And there was a potential of getting a scholarship to USC, but I went to my the business manager from the Progress Bulletin, and I said, if I take this job at the US, if I take the scholarship at USC, and I'm gone for 2 years, can I come back to a job here? He says yes. I said, where would I go when I came back? He says, the same place you are now. I thought, oh, that's not a lot of progress. Why don't I just stay and learn on the job? I've already been there 15 years. Learn on the job and just stay right here for a job. So I stayed there and it worked out very well because I went from there to the restaurant business, and from there to NBC, and from there to president of the foundation. So the choices I made, a lot of it's just pure luck. People say, how did you do what you did? And I say, you know what? Life is just being at the right place, the right time with the right skills. The right place at the right time with the right skills.
So I wanted to ask about the what was the name of the newspaper in Pomona?
The Pomona Progress Bulletin.
The Progress Bulletin.
It had about 40,000 circulation, but I tell you what, in the Pomona Valley, Chino, Claremont, Laverne, San Dimas, it was the dominant newspaper. It was bigger than the LA Times. The LA Times was the dominant newspaper in Southern California, but in the local areas, the local paper pretty well beat the LA Times in terms of circulation. The LA Times may have 5,000, and we had 40,000, so we covered it very, very well. But I'm going to switch over now because we've been talking primarily about my career. I'm going to switch over now to the backside, which has to do a lot of why I've been so successful, of the things that I did on the backside, and how I got involved in quote the media, and go on from there. When I came back from Korea, my brother-in-law, who was at one point mayor of Laverne, his name was Mike Morales. He had joined the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and he says, you got to come and join this group. It's fantastic. The guys are great, and we do all kinds of community projects in Laverne. So I said, okay, fine. So I joined the Junior Chamber, and I did very well. I became the president of the local Junior Chamber. I became a state vice president for the JCs. I became a national director for the United States JCs. And so I did very well in the JCs. So I was always active on the community side, in addition to my professional side. Always. First of all, I enjoyed it. Second of all, it makes you feel good to help others. It just does. So I was going down a dual track. Number one was my career. The other side was community service. And I was when I was 36, I was selected as Man of the Year in the city of Pomona. About San Antonio College, I was selected as Alumni of the Year at Mount San Antonio College. I was selected for the state of California as Alumni of the Year for the whole state of California for community colleges. So, but a lot of that had to do with both my professional side as well as my community side. But I've always been very active, and as you're going to see, from that material I gave you there, I was chairman of a state commission post, which is the Peace Officer Standards and Training. I was the chairman of the board of the second largest Red Cross chapter in the country. The biggest one is in New York, with New York and Connecticut, but we're the second largest chapter in the whole country, and so on down the line. I was president or chairman of the board. I was the president of the Los Angeles Press Club, which covered the whole county of Los Angeles. I was president of a child care center in East LA. What else was I? So anyway, I was really very, very, very active on both sides of both the community side and professional side. I was really very lucky. When I got to Channel 4, the vice president and general manager, his name was Bob Howard. He was, in his career, he had been the president of Junior Achievement. So he was also very community-minded and very, very busy on his community service side too. And he's also very smart. Right after I got the job, he says, one of the things I want you to do is, it's not part of your job, but you might enjoy doing it. He said, we want to be the #1 station in Los Angeles. And to do that, the biggest audience out there are the Mexicans. So if you can keep your eye out and start recruiting people who would come in, not just as anchors, but all kinds of jobs. I mean, we employ secretaries, we employ PR people, we employ all kinds of people who can work behind the scenes, and those jobs really pay very well. So I did that. When I got there, I looked at their handbook, and there were 2,000 employees at NBC Burbank. There were 6 Mexican names in the book. 5 years later, I looked at that same book and counted all the Mexican names. There were 200 Mexicans now employed at NBC in Burbank. So I became so good at that, by the way, because I was one of the first ones in. Fernando Del Rio came in soon after, but I became so good that the other stations would call me for leads. I got an attorney a job in personnel at ABC. He came the head of personnel for all of ABC for the whole West Coast. Alicia Sandoval, they came to me for somebody to host a Latin program on Channel 11, and I gave them her name, and they hired her. Yes, she became the producer host of a Latin program on KABC. So I got a lot of jobs for a lot of people in Los Angeles. Then Fernando came up with a great idea. Fernando said, why don't we all work together and form a group, Carib, and try to get people to do the same thing we're doing in Los Angeles, in San Diego, in San Francisco, up in Fresno and Bakersfield. I mean, there's about 4 big job markets in California, and they've got a lot of Latins who work there too. So we'll do seminars. We'll go up there one day, and they can come in, and we'll lecture to them about the kind of courses they should take, the kind of background they should have, and the path to get a job in the media. So we did that. Then this other friend, and I'll come up with his name at some point and send it to you, but I can't think of it now. He got a job at the television producers, which is all the people who somewhat control the movies in Los Angeles, and I saw his name in the trades. And of course, when you're in the business, you read the trades every day. And I called him up and we met. And he said, I've got an idea. He said, we need to get more Latins to work in the film business. I said, you're right. He said, you know what? You know who would be good to work with us? I said, who's that? He said, Ricardo Montalban. He says, so I'm going to call him and see if he wants to get involved and help us to recruit. Do seminars and teach them the path and also the courses and all that they should take to get jobs in the film business. So I said, fine. So he contacted Ricardo, and Ricardo said, you know what? My friends have been telling me that we should do that. And so he said absolutely. So he became the president of Nosotros, which was fantastic because he was very well known and very popular, very famous. And so he became the president, and we started to recruit actors and actresses. I guess they call them all actors now. There is no gender. So we used to meet, and we used to do, to raise money, we used to do programs at the Hollywood Bowl, and lucky for us, we got somebody named Tony DeMarco, who ended up being the agent for Fernando Valenzuela, who used to pitch for the LA Dodgers. He used to produce these programs, and I used to do the PR for the Hollywood Bowl, and we would attract 18,000 people who would pay hundreds of dollars to come in the Hollywood Bowl, and nosotros would take the money, the staff, to pay for their staff, and do all their programs to teach people the skills they needed for acting. Then the third one that I got involved with was, of course, the Frank Newton's group, and Frank Newton. See, you read about these people all in the trades, because the trades is like the Bible for the industry. Everything that happens there, they publish stories about him. So I met him, and I started to work with him to work in the people who were journalists who wanted to get a job in the media. So I started working with him on that, and then later on he thought that we should go nationwide with it, which we did, and we went all around the country. We went to probably, I would say 6, 7, 8 cities to see if they had an interest in forming this group, and we found enough people to come to a meeting in Washington D.C. to form the group. We had a trial meeting down in San Diego, and to see how they felt about it in California, and boy, we had, I don't know, a couple thousand people come down there for this conference, and it was fantastic. People just had a great interest in getting jobs in the media, so it wasn't a problem. What our job is to do seminars of, number one, the courses they should take, the avenues they should take, the things they should do to get a job in the media. It's as simple as that. So all three of them, I was a founder in all three groups, and they're not doing so well now. I talked to somebody who was telling me about Frank Newton's group back in Washington. When I was there, we had an office in the National Press Club building, and now he works out of his house now. Part of it is the fact that so many people work in the media. They don't feel the pressing need for those kind of jobs. They do it on their own because they're now taking courses and doing the things they should do to get jobs there. And if you look at television, they've succeeded very well. You pick up any newspapers. Of course, when you went to the conference for the journalists every year, they work for every major newspaper in the country: the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles, the Dallas Morning News. I mean, there are literally hundreds of them who work in a lot of major newspapers. part of it is the papers have recognized the fact they've got to have people from those communities if they're going to serve the community. It's that they can't do it just talking to their audience. They've got to expand their audience. And so they're very smart to do that because the audience is there, and if they do stories and see faces and do everything that appeals to them, they're going to be part of the mix, and they're going to be they're going to look for jobs in that business.
So, taking a step back, I wanted to ask, how was it to work in the media, especially in broadcasting, back when there were so few Latinos, Mexican Americans?
It wasn't a problem. It really wasn't. I can't tell you any problems that I encountered. The biggest problems I may have encountered is when I'd go out to speak to a group. One time I was speaking to a group of about 200-300 people in East LA, and of course they come down hard on you. Says, where's all our Mexican faces on television, and where's all our programs on television? We watch the news and we don't have any news about us. And I would explain to them how the system worked, and I said, you know what? The reason why there aren't more, in our case, Mexican faces on television is because not enough people are trying to get on television. I said, look at sports. Look at basketball. Who dominates basketball? Blacks. Why? Because there are literally hundreds of thousands of them who are trying to play, to work in basketball. Look at baseball. Who dominates the baseball business? Latins from all over the world. From Venezuela, from Spain, from Puerto Rico, from Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic probably has more people playing baseball than any other country. You know what? Because they got thousands of them down there trying to, quote, get a job in baseball. So you've got to have a lot of people trying to do something for some of them to succeed. Maybe 2% are going to succeed, but if you don't have 10,000 trying, you're not going to get your 2% is nothing if nobody's out there doing what they need to do. But it's not easy, and you got to apply yourself to do what needs to be done. I got an interview one time for somebody to go work in film. It was in television, and I said, so what'd you tell him? What kind of job are you looking for? He says, well, I like to do voiceovers. He's going to get a job doing voiceovers? I don't think so. I don't think he's going to get a job doing voiceovers. Those people have been doing that for many, 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 many years. He's not going to walk up from the outside just because he can mimic people. It's just not going to work that way. He didn't even get a second interview. They just kissed him off and he was out of it. And he still hasn't worked in the media, by the way. It's just, it isn't easy to do, and it's a lot of hard work, but you better apply yourself to what everybody has to do, including everybody who's in there. Everybody has to do to get a job in that industry. And if they don't do that, their competition is, so if you want to get a job, you better apply yourself and do what needs to be done if you want one of those jobs.
Okay, why was it important for you to bring more Latinos into the field, into the industry?
That's really very simple to answer. People want to know why, when you look back through history, why we aren't represented there, and I have a feeling we're not, only because they weren't people writing all those journals and doing everything that's required to be part of that. It's a matter of history, and it's a matter of representation. But if people aren't applying to work in those businesses, they're simply not there. And so if they're not there, people don't think either they don't want to be there, or there's too much work to get there, or they don't know the avenues to get there, and so they don't get there. So it's important for people to be seen all over the place, every place. Otherwise, they're just not there.
Do You also, a couple minutes ago, you mentioned meeting with groups who were pushing for more.
Right.
So that was, you were meeting with them representing NBC?
Well, they would invite me to come and meet, and of course the topic for them was why there are not more Latins in broadcasting, and I'd go to meet with them and I'd tell them the avenues they had to do and the classes they had to take and everything else to get into broadcasting, and I would use that story I told you. I says look at football, look at basketball. How many Mexicans do you see on those teams? Very few. Look at baseball. How many do you see on those teams? Hundreds. I mean, ethnic-wise, there are probably more Mexicans playing, not more Mexicans, more Latins playing baseball than any other group. Right now, I've been reading some stories about the fact there's a lack of blacks playing baseball. Well, why is that? They were, particularly when they were publicizing Jackie Robinson, who was the first black in baseball. What happened to all the blacks in baseball? Very simple. They're playing basketball. They're playing football. They're playing whatever they see, and wherever they want to go, that's what they're doing. If they see, by the same token, all these Latins who are in baseball in large numbers, it's because a lot of them try to do that. If there are 500 people trying to play baseball, 5 of them may make it. 5. You've got to have a lot of people trying before some will succeed, because everybody wants to do that, but not enough people are trying to put in the time, getting the preparation to do that. It's simple as that. So I say you simply got to pay your dues. You've got to do your prep. You've got to get inside. I said, you know what? If you get a job, it's like the camel in the tent story. If you get a job, if you have a chance to get a job in broadcasting, take it. I don't care whether you're the janitor. I don't care whether you're the messenger. I don't care what the job is. Get inside, and then do a good job, and start taking the classes, because you're going to see what those people do. Start taking the classes to prepare yourself for that. All of a sudden, they're looking for somebody to be promoted. They're going to look at you because they know you, and you've done a good job. You've prepared yourself for what they need, and so you're a perfect match. The system works the same for everybody. It's that yes, there is some racism. There's no doubt about that. There always is, but most of it is the fact that they're not prepared yet. And the other thing is, most of the time, they'll give them the job because they bring an extra element to it. What do they bring to it? Language. And not only that, because let's face it, all those companies are only interested in the bottom line. If they can sell more of their product, whatever the product is, and they have faces trying to sell that product, they're going to make more money because all of a sudden they've enlarged their market. So, yeah, they're going to hire you because you bring an extra element to the job.
I was going to ask, so do you remember who were the groups or the activists that were inviting you to talk to them, or what was the context?
No, we contacted them all. We contacted everybody. If somebody would meet somebody and they would start talking, and we were always looking.
Were these Chicano or Mexican American groups?
Well, in Los Angeles, it's primarily Mexicans. Now there's a lot of, I think I'm not sure which country it is, but there's two more countries that have a lot of people up here. Matter of fact, there's been stories in the paper because they come through Mexico and then come across the border. One of them is Guatemala, and the other one is not Honduras.
Salvador?
Nicaragua, maybe?
Salvador?
El Salvador. El Salvador is a lot of numbers. And why is this? Because life is so miserable in El Salvador. And also in other countries down there. They can't, first of all, they can't find a job, and second of all, when they do, it doesn't pay any money. So they want to come up here where they can make some money.
So, with Khalif and nosotros, the main goal was to get more people into the field.
Absolutely.
Getting training.
Absolutely.
Was there any, and we talked briefly about this before starting the interview, but at some point, was there any campaign to against stereotypical images of Latinos?
Sure.
So you mentioned the frito bandito.
Right. Okay. Frito-Lay had this commercial on Frito Bandito, this bearded Mexican with bullets across his chest, and they were very clever and ordinarily wouldn't bother people, but that's the only character they had on there. Well, I went to our general manager, Bob Howard, and I said, Bob, I'm getting a lot of complaints about the Frito Bandito. He says, well, we're going to reply to that. He's banned from appearing on Channel 4. Great. So I'm watching The Tonight Show, and of course that's a network program, and there's a Frito Bandito. I says, so I went back in to see him. I says, Bob, I says, he's off of KNBC, but they see him on The Tonight Show, and they don't know which is KNBC and which is the network. He's on The Tonight Show. He says, well, he's not anymore. He banned him from The Tonight Show. On top of that, Donicio Morales, who was head of an East LA group, wanted to also get rid of the Frito Bandito, I agreed to fly with him to Dallas, Texas, and talk to the president of Frito-Lay. So we did, and we did our plea about why they should remove the Frito Bandito off of television. And then when I got involved with Ricardo Montalban, I arranged for Ricardo to come to my office and sit at my desk and talk to the president of Frito-Lay to tell him why they should get rid of the Frito Bandito. And all those things, it could have been, and that's they said that the timing for the commercial was over, and they ran it for 6 months, and they're going to move on to some other commercial, but they removed it. I have no idea whether they removed it because of the pressures or whether the commercial just ran out, because they change commercials all the time. But I can tell you, I had a major hand in getting rid of the Frito Bandito. At least I got rid of it at NBC, period, which is a pretty big market. And he was removed from. They did remove it from television, and nobody's ever seen him since. Okay. I went to Lincoln Elementary School. I went to Benita High School. I went to Mount San Antonio College. I went to the University of California at Riverside. I went to work at the Progress Bulletin. I was there with a 2 years in the service. I was there for a total of 15 years, but 13 plus two in the service. Then I got this friend of mine who wanted me to join. He and a partner in the restaurant business. I left the Progress Bulletin and became part owner and in charge of marketing for 4 restaurants. They said that I would manage one of them, and do the marketing for all 4 of them. Later on, we opened a 5th restaurant in Pomona, but there were 2 Walters coffee shops. There was the Royal Tahitian in Ontario. There was the Casa de Mayo in Rancho Cucamonga, and there was the Barrister in Pomona. One time, Arthur Lyman, who's a big
attraction in Hawaii was coming here, and he had an empty weekend between his gigs, and so he called us because he saw we were at the Tahitian restaurant, and he wanted to know whether we'd like to hire him for one night, and so we did. And we did a lot of business. He was very popular in Hawaii, and people knew the name, and here he is in their backyard, and so we did very well. So Herb, who was a genius, he really was a genius. He thought, maybe we should do entertainment, and so we started to do entertainment. So pretty soon we, like Topsy, we grew, and in the summer we built a concert garden that seated 1,000 people out by the lake, and we started hiring people. So we had Ray Charles, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Sonny and Cher, the Righteous Brothers, Richard Pryor, Frank Gorsham. I mean, we would do the concert garden for 6 weeks. So we needed 6 attractions in the summertime for the concert garden. So we did that, which now has me dealing with all the newspapers that I did from West Covina to Riverside and San Bernardino. And so I wrote all the press releases and all the press, all the photography, and all the promotion, everything. But I got to know, not intimately, because they come and they go. It's just like somebody waving at you as they pass your house. But we did get into the entertainment business, and there it was like a tidal wave. Sometimes we'd make a lot of money, and sometimes we lost a lot of money. All those were not perfect attractions, and you can tell by the names they were not today's hits. They were older people that the older generation would know. So we did that, and then there was a time when they were opening all of these fast food places almost every week. I mean, every week. McDonald's was in San Bernardino, and they came to Pomona. Everybody was opening fast food places, and people would say, "Well, hell, they're not your competition. You got a coffee shop, you got a Royal Tahitian restaurant." And Herb's attitude was, "Hey, anybody who sells food and drinks is our competition," which is true. A lot of times when I'm busy, I don't stop at a restaurant to eat. I just go grab. Well, we travel cross country. We don't stop to eat. We just grab a sandwich at McDonald's and a Coke and keep on driving. So, yeah, it's all your competition. We wouldn't stop to eat at a restaurant till dinner time. So so we did that for about 7 years, and we weren't. After 7 years with all that competition, we weren't doing all that well financially. So we sold them one by one, got rid of all of them, and I ran for mayor of Pomona, and I missed it by 500 votes. About that time, I was still reading the trades because we had a subscription to Variety, and Herb saw that Channel 4, the NBC station in Los Angeles, had some problems with their station renewal. As you know, every 3 years you got to renew your television and radio license, and they divide the country into four areas, just like the time zones. So it was a time for our zone to apply. No, I guess they had divided into 3 because every 3 years you had to apply for your license. And there was a group in Los Angeles that applied to get the license from KNBC. And so Herb saw the story in the paper in Variety, and he says, "Hell, they ought to hire you to save their television license." I said, "Yeah, Herb, sure." So he simply picked up the phone and called them. And they gave me an interview. So I went in for my interview, and a month later I'm working for them. Now why am I not going to be working for them? They're looking to gain friends and backing. First of all, I had a big background in community service, so I knew what it was like to work out among the public. Number two, promoting our big name entertainment, Ray Charles and Duke Ellington and all those people, Louis Armstrong, they could see that I knew, that I knew what it was like to handle big names with newspapers, because I said newspapers from West Covina to San Bernardino, there were about probably 8 newspapers. And so I went in there and they interviewed me 2 times. The second interview, they hired me. They said, "Can you start next Monday?" I said, I've got a couple of the accounts I'm working for. If I have your permission to work myself out of a job, I can start on Monday. So I started on Monday in the press department, advertising and press, and they applied for their license, and the other people who were applying against us, they applied for it, and because we had so much support at this stage, which I had garnered with my work, with all the friends we had in the community, we got a renewal. So my job is over, right? About that time, our general manager decided he was going to do editorials on Channel 4, which is KNBC. So he started an editorial department. So they hired me to be assistant editorial director, and now I was promoted to manager of community relations. So I started there, and 6 months later, I now have a second job with a bigger title and more money. So I worked there. Well, about 3 years later, the press department was having some problems. The guy they hired was incompetent. And so the station manager called me up. He says, "We want you to take over the press department." And I said, "Okay." And so I became the manager of the press and community relations departments. So now I manage 2 departments. A manager at NBC is a department head. So I now manage 2 departments, and I'm the manager of press and community relations. And I have now 5 people working for me. About that time, it was 1979, the NBC had won the rights to the Olympics in 1984. So the guy who was the head of our communications department, they offered him a job. So he went to work for the LA Olympics. So his job is vacant. They gave me his job. So now I'm a vice president for corporate information for NBC on the West Coast. So I kid people when I tell them about this. I said, "You know what? I got there. They kept promoting me, so I kept staying. I went from administrator, which is the lowest. Well, they're lower jobs, but I mean, it's that you're a boss, and that's about it. I started as administrator of community relations, and now here I am, 10 years later, and I'm I'm vice president of NBC. So anyway, I told you about that job, and what my job primarily was communicating with the public. I had corporate advertising. I had VIPs. If the governor wanted to come to NBC, the president would come to NBC. Nixon came to NBC to announce he was going to China because he was up in Santa Barbara at the time. So I did advertising, corporate advertising. I was a company spokesman. If somebody called the company and said, what about such and such? The company would say, so and so wants to interview you about such and such. I said, fine. So I'd call them, and we do the interview. So I was a company spokesman. So I had 5 different jobs there, And I did that job for 10 years. Until 1990, I did that job. So anyway, I told you I told you about the Royal Tahitian. I told you about I went from the local station up to the network. So at that point, in 1986, General Electric bought NBC, and there used to be a joke. They called him Neutron Jack Welch. He said he buys a company. He says the buildings are still there, but all the people disappear. So he just fires all the people. He doesn't hire them to hire all those people. He first of all, it's the General Electric way. He can do the job with younger people and with less people, so he gets rid of them. So about 4 years later, if you were a vice president at 55 years old, they gave you, quote, what they call a package. Now, why at 55? Because they're a protected class. They don't want to hire them because they're afraid they might get sued by somebody for firing them because they're too old. So they didn't fire anybody. They said, would you like a package? So they paid them all to leave. Meanwhile, this friend of mine, who I told you was in the restaurant business with Herb Hath, very successful attorney, by the way, very successful. He won some huge cases. He won a case in Computerland. He won $300 million. I mean, he won some big cases. Anyway, I said, well, like what? They said, why don't you make up a package? So I did. And they came back a month later. They said, the companies that approved your package, you can leave next year. I says, oh, I forgot to include some things in my package. So finally, I gave them they said, well, we'll make up a package. I said, fine. So they made up a package for me. And they paid me for 83 weeks after I left. 83 weeks at my salary, and kept my Medicare, because I'm over 65 now. They kept my medical plan, they kept my Social Security, they kept everything, and they paid me for 83 weeks. They gave me 12 weeks of vacation, vacation. They gave me some consultancy, and they gave me severance. You know, companies have different pockets for budgeting purposes. So they simply go to a pocket and say, well, there's some money here, there's some money here. So out of the 3 pockets, they paid me for 83 weeks. I had told Herb, meanwhile, when I was 60, he says, why don't you come and run my foundation? He says, I can pay you well, and since I'm in a 50% tax bracket, it would only cost me 50 cents on the dollar. So I said, Herb, I'll tell you what I'll do. When I turn 62, I'll come and work for you. Well, now I'm at NBC, and it's January of 1889, and I'm now 61 years old. So I turned 62 in January 15th in 1990. So I said, I'll quit when I'm 62. I didn't know they were going to offer me the package, by the way. I had no idea what, that's all coming out of New York, personnel and everything else. But I'm observing what's going on, and all my friends who are vice presidents are all getting their, quote, packages and being paid to leave. So I knew what was going on, and I knew at some point they would arrive at my name, and they did. So anyway, I left, and about that, I left to go be president of a family foundation in Claremont. I gave away $11 million of his money over a period of 14 years. I thought I might work till I was 65, because I'm now 62. So hell, the job is so easy. If I had a phone and a fax and a computer, I could work anywhere. One time I went for 2 months to Europe when I ran the foundation. I mean, when you're giving away money, people do it on your terms. So it was easy to do. So anyway,
What? I'm sorry.
go ahead.
What type of programs were you supporting with the foundation?
Herb liked to deal with what he called poor people. Yeah, he loved to help poor people improve their lives and do better. We gave one time, Herb called me up on a Sunday morning. He said, "I got a great idea." "What's that, Herb?" He said, "You know, these community colleges, you can go to community college because there's no tuition." This was back in 1980s. They can go to school for about $1,000 a year. Why don't we give them $1,000 and they can get a job, they can get an education at a community college, because all they got to pay for is their parking, their books, their supplies. There is no tuition right now, so let's do that. So, okay, what do you want to do? Well, let's do 4 colleges. Let's do Mount San Antonio. Let's do one in Santa Ana and in San Bernardino. Let's do one in the valley, because they had an earthquake up there, and he thought they'd be looking for employment, and they did. There was Orange County, there was Mount Sac, there was the valley. Where the hell was the last one? I don't remember, but I'll tell you later. So anyway, I said fine. So we picked 4 colleges and gave them 25 scholarships each. 25 scholarships. We did it for 5 years. We gave them $1,000. So it's $100,000 a year for 5 years. So we gave scholarships to educate 500,000 people, 500,000 students, who can take a community college degree, by the way, and get a pretty good job. They're not going to get a job as a doctor or an attorney or something high that requires more education. But there's a lot of jobs you can get with a community college education. So we gave away 5,000 scholarships, 100 a year for 5 years, which cost us $500,000, but we educated 500,000 people. But he liked to deal with poor people. There was one group that used to buy shoes for little kids that couldn't afford to buy shoes to go to school. All kinds of people who had needs, different kinds, a battered women's shelter, you name it. We had all kinds of people that we gave money to. We didn't give money to them because we couldn't. We gave money to a group that gave it to them. Because we had to have a 501c3, which is a tax-exempt debt certificate, and they in turn would give the money to the people they were serving. So I did that for not 2-3 years. I did it for 14 years. So I retired a second time when I was 75, and I got married by then. I got married 8 years after my wife passed away, and I married Marilyn. She had a house in Anaheim Hills. I had a house in Glendale, so I sold my house because she was still working. I was working, but you know, I come and I go as I please. So I was single for 8 years. Then I married Marilyn, and we went into her house in 1992, and then I'm sorry, 1992, 1993, and then we bought this place in 1999, and we used to be weekenders out here. And in 1994, we decided, why are we having 2 houses driving back and forth? So we sold that house and moved out here. So we've lived here for 22 years we've lived here. Now, let me think now. Where I've covered going to NBC, I've covered the Royal Tahitian, I've covered everything when growing up and all that. Pa 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 pa. Oh, so anyway, out here, I don't like to sit around. This is unusual for me because I'm incapacitated. But I ran for president of the homeowner association, and I won that. So for 2 years, I was president of the homeowners association here. They have 504 condos, and I was president. But I didn't tell you this. When I was at NBC, I met this lady who was the executive director for the vice president general manager, and she passed away about 2006, and she left her money to a foundation in her name, and she asked me to run her foundation. So she got two more other people who are board members of the foundation, and I'm the chairman of the board of the Muriel Palia Foundation. So I still keep active, and then I now give away money for the Muriel Palia Foundation. I gave away, for example, the McCollum Theater here in Palm Desert. I gave them $100,000 to support their programs. I gave the local community college some money. I gave my old alma mater, Mount Sac, money. I gave the Living Desert money. I give the Battered Women's Shelter. I keep active and still giving away money to groups that need the money. So I do that. So, but I can even do it just sitting here, incapacitated, because again, Marilyn does most of my work for me because I can't see very well and can't hear very well. So she takes care of me and does all the work that I do. And of course I still am active overseeing my investments and the foundation and whatever else I have an interest in. So I still keep very busy. Okay, that in a nutshell, that's about it. We started the foundation in 2006, so we've been around now for 10 years. It's a $10 million foundation, and we give away about $500,000 a year. I've given away, it's not my money, of course, I give it away for others, but at NBC I gave away money for 20 years. I gave away money for Herb for 14 years. I gave away money for this foundation for 10 years. So I dare say, in my lifetime, I've given away money from 3 foundations for probably 11, 15, about $20 million. But see, I like to do that. I like to help people. I simply like to help people. I like to serve people. People help me the whole time. I mean, how did I get from a kid who used to go barefooted to save his shoes because the war was on and there was a depression? So a lot of people give you a lot of help. A lot of times you don't know who or what or where, but a lot of people help. Look at the journalism instructor at Mount Sac. He didn't have to come back to my desk and say, I think you ought to go and interview for this job, but he did. So he helped me. All kinds of people help a lot of other people. So I like to do the same thing because I'm able to. I'm lucky enough that I'm always affiliated with a foundation. I'm lucky enough that I can do it because I have this affiliation. Either NBC or the Half Foundation or the Palia Foundation. So I've been giving away money for people since 1969. How long is that?
58 almost, going on 58 years.
It's got to be more than 15. 69, 79, 89, 99, 2009, almost 46 years.
Yeah, no, I got the math completely wrong.
I know.
46.
I do the same thing. So I've been
Well,
giving
that's
away other
awesome.
people's money for 46 years. But it's pure luck. I make contributions on my own. On my income tax, I always contribute. There's a clinic in Orange County that I give money to. I give money to the Living Desert. So I give my own personal funds, but primarily the money I give away are the money I get from these foundations that I'm affiliated with. And I enjoy that because number one, I enjoy looking for them and seeking them out, and number two, contacting them and doing something for them. Like you told me that you do accept funds for your project. I think I can get some money for you. Well, that's what I do. I just help people who need help doing whatever they're doing.
You also mentioned the Red Cross.
Right. I became active with the Red Cross when I had an idea one time to do a health fair. And so I started a health fair, except, the health fair takes a lot of volunteers to run the health fairs, and I had no idea how to do that. So I contacted the Red Cross in Los Angeles, and they agreed to furnish all the volunteers to run the health fair. So we used to do the health fair for a month. I can't remember the month. We did it for 1 month, and we had them up in Ventura. We had them San Bernardino. We had them in Riverside. We had them in Orange County. We had a lot of people doing health fairs. We got to the point where we used to do 100,000 people a day who would go through these health fairs, which are really no more than volunteers, people in the medical field who come and volunteer their services to help the people that are coming there for their help. But more than one time, the people that were doing that work, they found somebody who had a very bad heart problem, and they saved their life by saying, "Do you know you have such and such, that you're in danger of having a heart attack?" So I could probably cite 5, 10 people who came to our health fair, and they saved their life by discovering that they had a problem they didn't know about. Because this is before Medicare and all that. It was way back in the 70s. So that when did I can't remember when Medicare started. I know it was Lyndon Johnson. It had to be in the 60s. Anyway, a lot of poor people simply don't, if they're under 65 and don't have Medicare, they simply don't go to the doctor because they can't afford to pay. So where do they go? They go and sit in the emergency ward, and those of course they just never pay their bill. So if they come to a health fair, they get a free exam, whatever the problem is, whether it's it doesn't matter what it is, they get a free exam, and I can tell you that more than once, probably more than 10 times, they found somebody who had a major problem, and they saved their life by saying, "You better go see a doctor and take care of that."
So that's been your involvement. That was what started your involvement with the Red Cross.
No, I did a lot of I was chairman of about 5 committees in the Red Cross. They asked me to serve on the state board. They asked me to serve on a national committee to supervise how they're doing their advertising and promotion. So they kept me very busy volunteering for different jobs with the Red Cross. So finally they said, "Why don't you run for the board?" So they put my name in, and I was elected to the Board of Governors of the American Red Cross. They meet 6 times a year back in Washington, and then at the national convention that they used to hold once a year. So that I then, when I got on the national board, I was put on the international committee, and I was the vice chair. So the chairman still worked. He was from Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I worked, but I could go and come as I pleased with the foundation. So every time there was a conference for the international people, and there are different levels of the Red Cross. They take the biggest countries, like Russia and England and Germany and France, and they take the three biggest countries in the world, and they meet separately from the other people. So I went to meetings in Sydney, Australia. I went to meetings in the Dominican Republic. I went to meetings in the Netherlands. I went to meetings to all over the world. And once in a while, they have you go out and look at a project. They asked me to go look at a project in Cambodia, so I went to Cambodia. I went to Kosovo. I went to Albania. I went to I can't remember them all, but I went to a lot of different countries to look and see what their projects were, and they were fascinating. And then here comes this. Every 2 years they hold this conference of all the Red Cross chapters around the world, and so they asked me to go and be the head of the delegation for this meeting in Geneva. So I went there. That was great because I'm the head of the American delegation, right? And every night people would do receptions and this and that and the other. So I'd get invited to the French embassy in Geneva, or the British would hold a reception for the heads of the delegation. So I'm going every night. I'm going to these meetings for all these major companies, all major countries around the world, and that was nice. So I've probably forgotten, not half, but a lot of them that I went to. Was great. But again, you do a job and you do it well, people invite you to do another job because they're looking for volunteers. I was elected in 1990. I was selected as the outstanding volunteer for all of Los Angeles County. The outstanding volunteer for all Los Angeles County, and I was selected as the outstanding volunteer for the whole county of Los Angeles. How many volunteers is that? I have no idea. Hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million. I don't know. But I was the volunteer of the year for LA County for this group in Los Angeles. Frank Newton, of course, headed the operation, and he had Gannett, who was paying for all that. So that he would simply, somebody always knew somebody else, someplace. So that they would contact somebody in Chicago, and that somebody would call a group of people together to meet with the delegation, who was the committee, the founders committee. So Frank would schedule the meetings, and the people, the local people would find a location for us to hold the meetings. We'd all fly there and have a meeting. The meetings normally were there probably, we were probably there a couple of days. We'd fly in, have the meeting the next day, and then leave town. So it was probably one day going, one day coming, and one day there. So I think we went to Chicago, went to San Francisco, we went to Puerto Rico, we went to Miami, we went to New York, we went to Washington. I dare say we went to, that's about 7, right? 6 right there. That may have been it. We used to go to all these different states, and we would talk to people about their interest in forming NHJ. So they would all give us their input. Frank would, of course, record all that down, and then we scheduled this meeting down in San Diego, which is just primarily California people, but we invited some other people from other states, and we had the meeting in San Diego. Then we scheduled this meeting in Washington D.C., and I was supposed to chair that with this attorney, Pasawat, what's his name?
Pasadakwa?
Pasarak, yes. He and I were supposed to chair the meeting to field all the questions and introduce all the speakers, except I didn't make it because my wife came down with cancer, and the day that I was supposed to be there, she was having an operation in Pomona for ovarian cancer, and she died 15 months later. So I didn't go to that meeting, but I was supposed to chair it with this attorney. So we traveled around, telling him what it was and listening to them. Frank, of course, would record it all, and they would all give us names and addresses and phone numbers, and Frank would take all that because he's going to invite all of them to come to the meeting in Washington.
Did you go to you said you went to the big conference in San Diego, right? In
Right.
1982. How do you remember that particular event, since it was the first of its type, right?
Right. The reason I remember it is about this point, LULAC is now interested in not the helping foreman, but it's just interested in the media. And they had asked me to have our executives come and address them about, quote, NBC programming. So I had invited about 5 people: broadcast standards, communications, programming. I had invited about 5 executives to come to the meeting, that meeting, which lasted about an hour and a half, it's like a seminar, and I introduced all of our executives and fielded all the questions to answer whatever they had to talk about. So I remembered only because I was heavily involved, not in just to invite people, but also because the biggest session we had was the NBC session with NBC, and I ran that session. Tony, what was it? Tony? Who was the head of LULAC? I can't remember.
So when the founding committee was formed, not all the members were active journalists at that moment.
I think they probably were, except for me. I wasn't a journalist because they look at me like they don't think of a PR guy as journalist. They think of him as in the media, but not necessarily a guy who writes either for television or a newspaper. So, and I'm trying to think give me some of the names and I'll tell you who wasn't.
From the founders?
Yeah, from the founders.
Robert Delaney's.
He wasn't media.
Edith Auslander.
Who?
Edith Auslander.
She was a teacher at over in Arizona. So she wasn't media. She was a teacher.
Frank Gomez.
He was in the media. There was a reporter from New York, a woman. She became president later on. Oh, I think what's her name from the New York Times was she on the
Norma Sosa?
Yes, I think she was. Of course, she's a reporter. So let's say 3 or 4 of us were not, but we were in the media, but not really reporters. If you look at the names, I can identify them all if you want, but as you've brought them up, that's what I remember.
And so the person who invited you into the committee was Mr. Newton?
Yes. Frank ran the whole show. It was his idea to do it. It was he did all the work to put them all together. He designed the programs. He did, that's a lot of work. He did all of that. I'm sure he had help to do it. And of course, got paid for whatever help he needed. But Frank did all that.
How did you, you mentioned him earlier, but how did you know him again? What was your previous work with him?
You know, I don't remember who introduced him to me. It's some, I don't know. Could have been a friend who was in the group. I don't know. Don't remember.
Did you at any point work with or meet with the California Chicano News Media Association?
Well, I told you, Fernando Del Rio had an idea to form the CCNMA, and again, because somebody knew somebody, we would call somebody in San Diego, and then go down there and meet with them in San Francisco and so forth. So somebody always knew somebody somewhere, so that Fernando did most of that work. Fernando's not only a smart guy; he's a hard worker. He was the first president.
The first president of the NHJ?
Chicano News Media Association.
Oh. Was it Del Olmo or Del Rio?
Oh, Del Olmo was part of their group.
Uh-huh.
Yes, he was.
Okay.
I don't know all their members, but Del Olmo was a member.
So one thing I wanted to ask about, so when you were doing these meetings, you were drafting the bylaws as well.
Frank was doing all that.
Do you remember any particular issues that maybe were more salient for you?
No, you know, he may have had help from Gannett, maybe some attorneys helped him to put all that together. I don't know, because I wasn't part of that. But Frank got it all done, and they probably contacted other press associations and looked at their bylaws, and then took out of that what they needed for their bylaws. That's probably how they did it, and Gannett may have helped them to find those associations. And you know, people are very willing to help and share, so they may have called, because you know, there's reporters, there's camera people, there's photographers. All of them have associations, all of them.
And in these meetings you were holding across the country, did you see any differences in how maybe journalists in a certain city or region, how they saw this new organization? Maybe they had different perspectives than those from California and the West Coast?
No, but you know, and this, I don't mean to embarrass you from Texas, except you know what, in terms of ideas, California is always ahead of the country. It's just the way it works. They're activists. They are. But it's that way with the country. Why is it so? Well, because they make movies here, so the people who have ideas to do movies are from here. They all of the new ideas generally, I say generally, come from California. Why is that? I don't know. It's just California. Maybe it's because people come here from all over the country, all over the world, and they are just ahead of themselves because so many people are here with quote ideas. But if you look at things that happen here, whether it's style, whether it's the media, whether it's whatever it is, most of them start in California.
And were the journalists who attended these meetings, were they equally receptive everywhere?
Tell me that again.
Were the people who attended these meetings, like in Miami, and
Right.
were they all equally interested? Or
Yep. Exactly. We just told them our ideas of what we had in mind, and they you know what their interest was. Most of those associations, not so much today. Not today. It's so they can exchange ideas, but back in those days, because we had so few people in quote the media, that it was really jobs. If there was a job in San Antonio, somebody would call Frank and say, Frank, they're looking for a reporter in San Antonio. Do you have somebody in the group who would like to apply for that job? So primarily, most of their reason for joining is jobs. Jobs. And that's the way it worked out, by the way. That is the way it worked out.
You already mentioned this briefly earlier, but so NBC was supportive of your involvement in this, right?
Right.
They were even paying for some of these activities?
They paid all my expenses. I had an expense account of $25,000. So all of my travel, all of my hotels, all of my expenses, wherever I went, was covered in my budget. And I had $25,000 to spend. So yes, they paid for it because it's part of my budget. I didn't have to say I'm doing this with that. I just did it because it was my budget.
Was the company interested in seeing this happen?
They loved it. They loved it, absolutely. Because they wanted the company to succeed in what we were trying to do. Because let's face it, they need to do it too, and they weren't doing it, so they looked to us to do it. That's why I told you that I got people jobs in California, from New York and Chicago, and not all around the whole country, but sometimes people will say, "We've got this job. You have anybody in mind?" I says, "Yeah, I know such and such." You know Linda Alvarez? Linda Alvarez was an anchor in Los Angeles at KNBC, and she was in Chicago. And I didn't get. I was tracking her all the time. I was making a speech one time to a Kiwanis club in downtown Los Angeles, and this father came up to me. This gentleman came up to me. He said, "I have a daughter," he says, who works in Chicago for. I think she worked for NBC in Chicago. She's in a public affairs program, and he lived, of course, in Los Angeles. He said, "I'd love for her to come to LA. Would you look around and see if you can get her some leads for a job in Los Angeles?" I said, "Sure, I'll be happy to." So I did that for a while, but nothing was materializing. So she eventually got a job as an anchor. Where? In Phoenix. So I discovered she was there and went to visit her and so forth. And I came back to our station manager then, and I said, Linda's in Phoenix now as an anchor. We need an anchor here because Ed Roybal, who was a member of Congress, had been hot after us for a station in Los Angeles to get an anchor, a Latin anchor. So we wanted to be the first. So you don't steal employees from your own company. So he made a deal with them to release her to come to Los Angeles, and they in turn did something for them. I have no idea what they did. I didn't, not that it was illegal or anything, but I know he didn't steal her because they would get mad at him for stealing one of their employees. And she's an anchor, by the way, on the 11 o'clock news. So anyway, she came to Los Angeles, and she was an anchor in Los Angeles. She was an anchor and a weekend anchor. I got another woman who a job as the anchor for the program that precedes the Today Show. She went, by the way, eventually to Albuquerque. I think she's still around, someplace there. Then let me think, who else? Oh, I got a job from somebody from New York to come to Los Angeles to be a producer of our Latin themed show. Can't remember the name of the show, but David Ochoa. David Ochoa, does he come up on your radar?
I don't think I know.
he was a producer host of a program on KNBC. He and what was her name? There was another woman who Julie Nava come up on your radar? Julie Nava was very active in LA. I mean, he was a pretty big name. I don't think he was on the school board, but I mean, Julian was taught at Cal State Northridge, and he asked me. He says, I've got a niece. I can't think of her name. She was married to Art Torres, and would you look around and see if you can find her a job at KNBC? So I did, and she got hired at KNBC, and then later on, through the station manager, I took the station manager and the news director out for lunch, or they took me to lunch, and I told him, you guys are always hungry for more viewers. The biggest pile of viewers out there are the Mexicans, but you don't have anything to attract them. You guys ought to hire some reporters who they can relate to. So I got a job over in the news department for David Ochoa, who was that anchor on that, can't remember the name of the program, and Art Torres' wife then, Nava, her name was Nava. Can't remember her first name. Anyway, they gave both of them jobs as reporters on the KNBC News. But people approached me for this or that or the other, and I told you I had a great Rolodex, and I just kept very active because I'm out there doing whatever I'm doing, so it works well.
You mentioned Congressman Roybal
Yes.
was advocating for a Latino anchor.
No, his niece. I mean, I'm sorry, not his niece. Wait a minute. No, he wanted a station in LA to hire a Latino anchor.
Okay.
He didn't care who. So we hired Linda Alvarez to be a matter of fact. After we hired her, before we announced her, he says, "You take Roybal out to lunch. You tell him we've done what he asked." So I did. We went to lunch over at Universal, and I told him, Ed, we have the first Latin anchor in Los Angeles. Her name is Linda Alvarez.
Was this? Did this happen again for other issues like Latina, Mexican American politicians putting pressure on the media to increase the visibility?
Well, of course, Roybal was a member of Congress. We used to hear from politicians, yeah. City council members, no supervisors, they didn't have any. Everybody was pushing and pulling. There was a lot of. It was back in the 80s. Remember the 60s? How old are you?
Me, I'm 31.
You weren't around in the 60s.
I was born in the 80s.
In the 60s, there were a lot of pressure groups. A lot. Look at Berkeley. The free speech movement started up there. It's just the way things were done back in those days. It's not the same now. I've been watching the news, and for example, the new Supreme Court justice that Trump nominated, people, it's common knowledge that I think the Koch brothers donated $15 million to get him elected to get him approved for that position. And I have another friend of mine who works for another group, I don't know what they're spending, but they're working the opposite side. They don't want him on there because he's too conservative. Anyway, as the world changes, times change. here they are doing this campaign. They're spending $50 million to get him on the Supreme Court. But look at the last election. Look at the stuff on television now, with supposedly the Russians who have hundreds of people sending out all these emails to influence people. There's an underground world now that was never, ever, ever around back in those days. Then they would just form a group and they would start crusading for whatever they were looking for. Now it's almost all hidden.
Going back to NHJ.
Okay.
After the organization was established and incorporated, how involved did you stay
With who now?
with NHJ?
I went to all their conferences. I went to them up to even 5 years after I was out of there. So I went to all their conferences. Was I active beyond that? Not really. If I went to Washington, I always dealt with Frank, who used to be across the bridge there in where the Gannett offices are. So I always kept in touch with him. But I went to their conference, but I really didn't participate in their doings because, first of all, I'm not a journalist. Second of all, there's nothing that he needed me for because he's already active and has a staff and everything else. He has an office in the National Press Club building, and when I went there for 2 months to run NHJ, they were trying to cut their rent, so I found them a new office while I was there for 2 months. So I moved them to a different office and found them a new executive director. Was it Jose Murray?
McMurray?
Right. Yeah, where is he around now?
I haven't. picked up.
He was at National Public Radio when I found him. He wasn't my first choice, by the way. I found an editor or reporter down in San Antonio, Texas, that I really loved, and I wanted him to get a job, but he wasn't forceful enough to make an impression, and Jose, if nothing else, is forceful. I mean, he'll swallow you whole if you don't watch out. But I lost him. Period. I have no idea where he is, what he's doing. I mean, all those people disappeared off my radar. I have no idea where they went or what they're doing.
So how long were you the interim executive director?
2 months.
2 months.
January and February of 1990.
Okay. And you were also leading the search for the new permanent director, right?
That was my primary job. I was organizing the conferences in San Francisco, and I was finding a new executive director. And day to day, I ran whatever crossed my desk, whatever came across, I would take care of that. But primarily, I organized the conference in San Francisco. And ran the conference in San Francisco, and found him somebody to run. You know, I'd call the board in. I would get the application. I sent them out to the board members, and they would look them over. And they finally invited, I think, 2 or 3 to come and make a presentation to the board. So they came to Washington and made a presentation. And based on that, they hired Jose. But there was a reporter from one of the New York papers who was very active. She was president, matter of fact, at that time. Norma was very active. Norma was one of the really strong leaders of the group at that stage.
As we move on to wrap up the interview, I wanted to ask you, what was your main contribution to the formation of NAHJ?
Ideas and contacts with any person I had relationship with. Uh, that's about it. They obviously liked my ideas because, but see, I had been involved with so many groups. I had a lot of experience with quote groups, how they function, how successful they were with whatever their structure was and all of that. So I, based on my experience, 'cause every group that I was a member of, except for the Red Cross, because that's a presidential appointment, I've either risen to the head as chairman or president. All of them. It's just the way it works. You know, I become active. I was appointed by the governor to a commission, and when I left, I was the chairman of the commission. I don't know how else to explain it to you, but that's about it. It's just ideas and contacts. Anyway, I organized the conference in San Francisco. I organized the conference in Albuquerque, and I organized a conference in New York.
So this was, I don't have the timeline with me right now. So these were after?
After 1990.
Oh, okay, so this was after your stint as interim director.
Yes, I'm out now. I'm out of the media, and I'm out of. I'm in Claremont running this foundation.
So since the creation of NAHJ 30 plus years ago, how do you think has the inclusion, the visibility of Latinos and Latinas in the news, do you think it has changed since then?
Oh, lot. I'm not sure how much television you watch, but I watch a lot because I've got nothing else to do, right? If you look at all the news coverage on the election and disasters, either floods or tornadoes or whatever the problems are, if you look at you look at any of the big stations, boy, at NBC, I think they've got 3 reporters that appear on the air, not every day, but if they're covering those news, they appear on there. In a week, they might appear on there 4 or 5 times. They're all over the place. But so does. I think NBC does the best job, but ABC and CBS are not far behind. They've all got Latin reporters who are part of their staff now. There's a lot of them. If you ever just have some free time when you're doing some work, just put on the news and you'll see their names pop up there. Particularly when it's a hot story.
And it's kind of related. So do you think the coverage of Latinos, the images they use, and the presence of Latinos in the news contents, have they changed since then?
You know, that's a very complicated question. I don't necessarily think it's changed since then or because of them. Local reporters, yes, because if a reporter's really doing his job, he knows the community, and he'll bring in stories that they would have overlooked because they just don't know that community. So it makes a big difference there. On the network level, no, because they're just doing a story that has nothing to do with Latinos. If they're in an area that's heavy and they're involved, that might work. But I don't think it's not a major force to make change. No. What it does do though, it attracts viewers, which is good, and it also lets them see that they're being covered by somebody who they can relate to. And that's good.
Kind of related, how do you think the organization has changed over the years, or at least when you were still In,
NHJ? You know, I've been out of there for 27 years. I have no idea. None.
do you recall from back then, do you recall any particular achievements or any particular problems or disappointments?
For which appointment now?
Disappointment. So achievements
Oh,
or
no.
disappointment?
No. What it has done, because if you look around and look at all the major newspapers, look at the bylines, look at television, look at radio, look at all of that, and you'll see a lot of Latin names of people who are doing that work. So yes, it has made a big difference in terms of the people who are dealing with those topics. But since they don't just do Latin programs and they don't want to, they're not really bringing all those across. But that's the way it should work. You don't put ethnicity on every story. Every story you submit doesn't need to have a Latin theme. As I said before, on a local story, yes, that's invaluable because now their stories are getting told on the air. So it makes a big difference on local television, local news, but on a network because the universe is so big. What do we have? 200 and some million people. That it doesn't move the needle at all.
Okay. So I think that was mostly what I wanted to ask.
Okay.
Right now, is there anything I missed?
Not to my knowledge. I think you do have the name of the guy who started Nosotros, so you have that. What else did I owe you? If I come across stuff, I'll just put it in the mail to you. Marilyn has your address?
No, I will give that to you.
Okay.
Before leaving. All right.
And she'll take you out to the garage and show you my invitation for the state dinner for the President of Mexico, whose name I don't even remember.
Oh, certainly.
You're talking about 1970. What's that? 40 years ago? 80, 90, 100, 110. That's 46 years, 47 years ago. I have no idea. Hell, I can't remember who was president last year.